ReZero, Starting Life in Another World, is an anime that I love. The characters have depth, the story is engaging, the atmosphere enticing, and most of all, its world building is phenomenal. The world that has been built for this series is so incredibly interesting with a depth you continuously unravel that it puts itself in one of my top isekai of all time. Before we get started, I'd like to preface what ReZero actually is so that if you decide it interests you and you would like to give it a watch, then you can safely click away before any crucial spoilers are shared. Also, we'll be solely looking at the animated series, excluding the 2 canon movies, for this video. ReZero is an isekai, which, for those of you who don't know, is a subgenre of anime where the main character is suddenly transported to another world, typically due to logging into another game, at the start of new content, being summoned by locals, or being killed by our Lord and Savior Truck-kun. More often than not, isekai typically follows similar tropes that make them hard to stand out from the ever-growing crowd of isekai anime. One defining feature of isekai is the trope that the main character is meant to have some sort of supernatural power in the scope of the world that they have been transported to. From the ability to wield the strongest magic known to man, to being able to level up impossibly fast, making them the most skilled swordsman in the world. What sets ReZero apart in this particular trope is our main character's ability. He is not strong, he is not smart, he doesn't even have all that much mana. But every time he dies, he is brought back to a set time before the death takes place. ReZero is defined as an action-adventure isekai, but it is dark and gruesome, and it holds no punches. It utilizes everything it gives you. If you do not like dark shows, do not watch this show. It is very heavy at times. If you are still deciding at this point, then the quick rundown is that ReZero is a show about Natsuki Subaru, an unemployed shut-in gamer turned unemployed homeless civilian who dies over and over again only to be revived each time so that he might achieve his goals and above all else, survive. Yet he aims to help a woman become queen who we quickly learn is despised by everyone because she looks identical to an evil witch that no longer physically exists but left quite an impression on the world. This proves challenging as he combats countless obstacles, armed with only his unrealistic gamer body and his ability to come back to life with retained knowledge from all of his past lives. Join him as he gets his ass kicked, as he battles powerful cultists, legendary knights, a lot of feelings, and world-ending apocalypses. Can he save the future queen? How will he best the next impossible task for him? Find out in ReZero. Also, only he can remember stuff from his past lives, which causes him to dissonate with reality a few times, and he struggles to stay sane through dying agonizing deaths countless times. I genuinely love this show. Anyways, from here on out, there will be spoilers for the show, so if any of what I said just sounds interesting, I suggest you go watch before coming back. From the get-go, we are immediately thrust into a situation that we don't quite understand yet. We flash between a fading consciousness and our main protagonist. We can't quite make out the connection just yet, which immediately engages us in this mysterious circumstance. Moments later, we randomly find ourselves in a fantasy world with Subaru, who looks equally as confused. But like the isekai-loving shut-in that he is, one of the first things on Subaru's mind is his isekai main character power. I mean, it's an isekai. He has to be guaranteed magical powers, right? Okay, what about God tier starting gear? A mystical heroine to lead on the path to heroism? So he doesn't have magic, he doesn't have weapons or armor, and no one is coming for him. He has no knowledge as to where he is, and no one seems to help him out. It is here in these beginning episodes where we do get major glimpses into the world that we have been transported to. We are shown that demi-humans are everywhere in the city, and that there is even some segregation. Carriages are drawn by giant lizards and ground dragons. Spirits exist, and utilizing them allows one to cast magic, and depending on the tier of spirit you use, changes the amount of strength of your magic. We are also introduced to specific characters through direct interaction. The apple salesman, the 3 crooks, the thief, the greater spirit named Puck, and the main heroine of our story, Emilia, who we are initially introduced to as Setela. We spend most of our time with a silver-haired half-elf during the first episode, as Subaru helps her look for the person that stole something valuable from her. We get to know Amelia and develop a small bond to her alongside Subaru, as she is the only person in this unfamiliar world that has given him any time and help. We learn that she is kind but also a little dense at times, and the only thing we have going right now is resolving the theft. So Subaru tracks down the thief's last known location, and we end at our first episode there. Following them into the thief's location, we are suddenly hit with the dark intensity this show has in store for us. Bodies on the floor, then Subaru dying, slowly and painfully, seen through his eyes, a scene all too familiar as we remember the flashes of the unsettling scene while Subaru was shopping. And as Subaru dies, so does Amelia as her dying hand lay next to Subaru's. Then, like nothing happened, we're back at the Apple salesman. Subaru, haunted, having just died, struggles to understand what just happened, yet he carries about his day confused, trying to figure it out. And then we meet the three crooks one more time, in the same street as before. He then goes to the scene of his death, and everything is fine. He meets the thief once more who doesn't remember him, along with a new character. After some dialogue and attempted grifting, we meet Elsa, the person sent to buy Amelia's valuable from the thief. Yet Subaru's deal is seemingly more valuable, so he ends up winning the bidding war. Elsa then asks him what he will do with the insignia, where he admits he will return it to its owner, and then shit hits the fan. Everyone dies, but we do see the first time Subaru uses knowledge from his past to gain some sort of advantage, but it's all for naught as Subaru wakes up back in front of the salesman. He sees Satala and chases her, screaming her name, only to be met with anger as she tells him that she doesn't know him, and that he called her by the name of the jealous witch, whom everyone seemingly fears at the mention of the name. And within our first 2 episodes, it has already been established that there is some larger conspiracy revolving around Amelia, who at this point we do believe to be Satala, and her insignia, that a large majority of the population is demi-human, some form of the segregation exists in the city, there is a witch that sparks fear into the hearts of everyone when her name is mentioned, Amelia looks just like said witch, whenever Subaru dies, he is reawoken at a fixed point in time before the cause of his death, and finally, no one remembers Subaru or anything he has done in his previous life, but he remembers everything. This last part is significant, as it either justifies his actions later on or massively infuriates you. For so long, I struggled to care for Subaru, because he was given this power to rewrite destiny at the expense of his life, which means he could achieve his greatest possible outcome had he just reset his timeline. But going through all the pain and deaths he had went through really messes with one's sanity. And I had previously claimed that what had brought Re's 0 score down was the fact that Subaru didn't ever learn from his arcs, but that's not true. I rewatched this show to really grapple why this show irritated me, and the reality is, it doesn't. It's a genuinely good show that has mild moments that fall flat, and Subaru learns and grows way more than I ever gave him credit for. It was easy for me to sit on my couch and think about how unoptimal he was for not using his ability to the fullest. Why didn't he just off himself to change the outcome of the duel? He could, if he really wanted to, kill himself over and over and over while training to use his weapon until he is proficient in it, but he doesn't, and I'm not sure I would either. But the worst thing about this ability is the fact that no one remembers, and he can't tell anyone. While it is helpful against his enemies as he will always be one step ahead, this tears his heart multiple times. When he does try to tell someone, this happens. In the arc shortly after this one, Subaru meets the community's fan-favorite waifu, Rem. He also meets Roswall and Ram and some villagers, but Rem will be more important as she ends up being the catalyst of Subaru's growth in this arc. After finally saving the day in Arc 1, much to the credit of Amelia and the greatest swordsman of the age, Subaru is brought back to Roswall's mansion, which is where Amelia lives, because as everyone knows, you always live with your political backers. After all, it is well known that the leaders of the CPSU would have frequent slumber parties with Joseph Stalin. But after meeting Roswall, and with no direction with what to do in this unknown world, Subaru becomes a maid. Just kidding, he becomes a butler. He learns about the mansion and gets to know Rem and Ram, the sister maids of the mansion, only distinguishable by their hair and personalities. Make of that as you will. All seems to be going well, and Subaru actually lands a date with Amelia. Only the date never happens, because Subaru wakes up a few days later, and now the audience and Subaru both know something killed him. So he spends his time learning about curses in the world as he tries figuring out what killed him. And we eventually get to the chains. And real quick here, I want to take a moment to highlight the sheer creepiness of ReZero's soundtrack. Every time something sinister happens, there is always a strong sound that you will not forget. But the chains become significant, and we quickly learn it's because Rem wields a flail with a long chain, and Rem has been killing Subaru. Yet we like Rem. We spent a few lives building trust with Rem, right? Well, not entirely. Because while we have been getting closer to Rem and Ram, they have only just met Subaru, and apparently the jealous witch's scent is on Subaru, and no one likes the jealous witch. We also learn about the witch's cult, which, based on the knowledge we have so far, would lead us to infer that it is a cult dedicated to Satala, the jealous witch. This throws Subaru for a loop, and he changes his plan in order to experiment. Yeah, the thing I wish he did before deciding to make this video. However, during this life, Rem dies instead of him. This causes everyone to get up in arms, and the whole mansion is split between who to blame. He can't explain anything because he doesn't know anything, and for what he does know, he risks his life if he tells anyone. So being the target of the accusations, he leaves, trying to escape. But Ram chases him down, and it's here, atop a cliff with jagged rocks below him, where he decides for the first time that he will end his life to save everyone. So now he sets out to save Rem and himself from death, but he has no idea what caused Rem to die. And throughout the rest of this arc, Subaru bonds with Rem, who sees herself as less than her sister. The cause of this negative self-perception is shown to us in a flashback, where we are shown that the horns are the source of demonic power and that Ram was much stronger than Rem. This caused Rem to be praised and Rem to be seen as needing protection. But when their village was attacked, Rem lost her horn, and now Rem is stronger than her sister. It's a tricky little complex Rem has that Subaru managed to break through and reveal to her how competent and lovable she is, that she is her own person, that he knows her as Rem and not Ram's weaker sister. This emotionally heals Rem's lifelong negative self-perception, and her opinion of Subaru increases immensely. So much so that when Subaru becomes unconscious due to the curse still being active, she goes into a fury, hunting down anything and everything that might be causing the curse in an attempt to stop it at the source. But she ends up losing control, so while Subaru and Rem are not wanting Rem to die, they go and try to save her. Eventually, Subaru does end up saving Rem, meaning he has both saved her physically and emotionally. This causes Rem to fall in love with Subaru, viewing him as her hero, as she will later reveal in the next arc when Subaru reaches an all-time low. Now it's at this point where I will get into it more vaguely, as the next few arcs are much longer, and there are only a few key scenes I really want to touch on. If I had to summarize everything thus far, I would say that the first two arcs are excellent at laying bare what the audience is getting themselves into. It sets up our knowledge of Subaru and how quickly he forms attachments to people and is willing to risk his life for them. It also shows us that when he seeks to achieve his goal, he positively impacts all of those around him. This is notably seen in his interactions and build-up with Rem. It is also later seen when he resolves a conflict with one of his rivals, Julius. The next arc, on the other hand, has the best examples of live world building in the whole series. World building is the process of developing a world such that a story can take place and utilizes elements to enhance its immersion and narrative. Live world building is my term for a category of world building that is implemented alongside the character's exploration without the need for exposition. The third arc of ReZero does this phenomenally, particularly episode 16. Up until this point, Subaru went against Amelia's wishes and entered an exclusive event that Amelia is a part of, vocally interrupt nobility in defense of Amelia, causing her to become greatly embarrassed. He then insults the knights, resulting in his shit getting kicked in, embarrassing her more and potentially ruining their image. Then Amelia and Subaru get into a fight where he says some really cringe shit. Now, while we understand what he is trying to say, this has a very different meanings for Subaru and Emilia, because Emilia doesn't know what Subaru went through. She can't know, so of course it's not fair of him to put her in this spot. Also, she doesn't know, so while he is talking about all of his deaths, she only has the knowledge of Arc 1 and 2, which didn't have much interaction between the two of them. Also, it's extra cringe because he didn't actually save her, it was this guy who defeated Elsa, and Roswall is the one that saved him in Arc 2. So in this timeline, he didn't ever really save her at all. This lands him at one of Emilia's rivals' house, where he trains with his heart to get stronger, only to return to Roswall Manor to find everyone is dead by hooded figures. Wait a minute. We've seen these before. These are the same guys that killed Rem and Ram's village. This is one such example of live world building because we have been offered 2 bits of information that add some layer of depth to the world, especially when we meet their leader, who reveals them to be the witch's cult. Now we know the witch's cult killed Rem's village. So what? Well, since the cult killed Rem's village with the exception of the 2 sisters, there must be something important about them. Pair that with our assumption that this is a cult dedicated to the Jealous Witch and Emilia shares a strong likeness to Satala, then we can infer that there is some connection between Ram and Emilia beyond just Maiden Master. We do learn a bit more about this connection in Arc 4, but for now, Subaru knows everyone dies in a matter of days. With this knowledge, he sets out to leave early so we can try and save everyone. And so we arrive at episode 16, which in all of this arc is the pivotal moment where he grows as a character and we learn about another looming threat. Subaru goes around asking all of Emilia's rivals for help in order to save Emilia, but he has no sway over any of them and ends up accidentally helping or insulting some of them. But through these experiences, he learns valuable skills such as what one should do to prepare for negotiation, using someone else's desires to effectively negotiate, and how to present oneself when looking to work with others. These don't get applied until a later episode, but the fact that they get applied is still worth mentioning, especially with how much irritation I had for the series for lack of character growth, even though it happens in many more ways than just how to use power. After getting rejected by everyone he asked help from, he leaves early anyways to save everyone. On the road, he meets merchants like our best boy Otto. He hires them to evacuate the citizens of the village near Roswall's manor, and later that night they take off to do so. Rem and Subaru ride next to Otto's cart, and it's around this point, while they are on the road, where we get a great example of live world building. As Subaru and Rem are on the road talking to Otto with another merchant, a fog settles in. So far, the camera has always been clear to depict the extra merchant on Subaru's right. We learn about Flugel's tree, which acts as a landmark, and so far has no extra meaning. But after looking upon it, Subaru notices that the merchant is gone. He asks Otto about it, and Otto, who we know engaged in conversation with the merchant, says no one was ever there. The merchant is just gone. They disappeared, and it seems like only Subaru remembers who they were. Then a fog settles in, and no one seems to pay it any attention until Subaru shines a light and reveals a giant eye. All carts speed up, and Rem ends up sacrificing herself to save Subaru. She leaves to fight the white whale, and Subaru and Otto begin yelling at each other. And then mid-conversation, Otto forgets who Rem is, as if Rem never existed. We find out later that this is the white whale, a creation made by the Witch of Gluttony that has been terrorizing the world for centuries. Everyone knows of it, but seemingly only the audience and Subaru knows that should you die to the white whale, your existence will be erased. We kind of find out that it is a bit more complicated than that, but it still stands. If you face against the white whale and lose, no one will remember you. And it took only a couple of minutes for ReZero to show us that the fog is tied to the white whale, which is tied to the total erasure of one's existence, creating a much more drastic threat. In the case of Wilhelm, Reinhardt's dad and the husband of the master swordsman of his generation, he claims his wife died fighting the white whale, but he can still remember his wife. He flashes back to the first days he met his wife, and the build up to his training and then them getting married. So she wasn't forgotten. Her history remains, but she lost the white whale. This is one of the few times where I cannot determine if this is a hole in the logic built for this beast or if there is an unexplained element at play. It would probably be fitting if love triumphed over the memory loss, but we know that can't be the case because when Rem's name is eaten by the Archbishop of Gluttony, Rem never knew who Rem was. Unless it is unique to the white whale, I personally prefer the idea that any death from the white whale allows it to eat through the victim's existence, and the only way to be able to keep track of casualties was through number tracking. Anyways, this video is getting a bit long, and Arc 4 is the longest arc by far. It also contains probably the most horrific death yet. What this arc boils down to is Subaru learning to accept that people do love and care for him. A lot of it has to deal with confronting your past and understanding that the past doesn't need to define you. It doesn't change who you are now. Amelia remembered her past and learned who she truly is, and that she is strong enough to also protect those she cares about. A new character, Garfield, learned that his mother did in fact love him and didn't leave him to find happiness, but left to try and go find his dad. All of these occurred in probably my favorite addition to the story so far. So, at the end of Arc 3, Subaru saves Amelia, but they find out that the survivors from the White Whale fight got into contact with the Archbishops of Sin, Gluttony, and Greed. This rendered one of Amelia's rivals memoryless, and Rem in a coma with no one except Subaru having any memory of Rem, including Ram. This emotionally destroys Subaru. Especially considering when Subaru was at his lowest point in Arc 3, Rem confessed her love to him and told him everything she loved about him to combat his self-loathing. So naturally, he wants to save her. So he kills himself. But he wakes up after the damage is done, and Rem will always be forgotten by everyone, and no one will know why. So the villagers are brought back to the village, but the group that left with Ram and Roswall are nowhere to be seen. Turns out, they went to this place called the Sanctuary. So Amelia, Otto, and Subaru head to the Sanctuary. The Sanctuary is a place that traps anything of mixed blood with equal proportions of each type. This includes demi-humans and half-elves, such as Amelia. Upon entering the Sanctuary, Subaru is teleported and then passes out next to a tomb where he dreams about Echidna, the Witch of Greed, who grants him the ability to undergo the trials. So now Amelia is trapped in the Sanctuary and the villagers aren't allowed to leave because the demi-humans are keeping them hostage, until Amelia or Subaru frees them by clearing the trials that break the barrier. Subaru manages to convince the locals into letting the villagers go, so he leads them home only to find everyone that was there before him, Amelia, and Otto left is now dead. So now his priority is saving the town, but he also wants to support Amelia, who fails the trial immediately, and like the lovesick puppy he is, he rushes into the tomb and accidentally clears the first trial. At some point, Subaru awakens to a snowstorm in the Sanctuary, and everyone is gone, but there are rabbits everywhere, and it is truly terrifying. They end up becoming the second main threat that happens at the same time as a manor being attacked, so Subaru has to take care of two major obstacles. We then also learn that Roswall has been responsible for everything. He led the cult to his manor, he hired the assassins to attack the manor in this arc, and he started the snowstorm. Also, he led the cult in killing Ram's village. But one thing that isn't explicitly said, one of the assassins is one of the children Subaru saves in Arc 2. Which means Roswall has been planning this since the beginning, and likely planned the assault in that very arc. But the two parts of this arc that blew me away conceptually were the Witch's Tea Party and the second trial undergone by Subaru. To start, the second trial undergone by Subaru was one of the few times we actually witnessed consequences as a result of his deaths. Previously, it was known that when Subaru died, he would restart his life from a certain point in order to avoid death and complete his objectives, and we don't ever really consider the consequences. During my first watch, I got annoyed that he didn't kill himself more to maximize the gain he could receive. But the second trial thwarts all of this. In this trial, Subaru is confronted with each potential timeline he has died in. He is forced to witness everyone around him grieving his death, even those he would not expect to grieve. This hit me like a ton of bricks, especially when Subaru is forced to watch Amelia and two other characters we have come to love crying over his body because he killed himself to try and go back and save Rem. Watching as people who see him as a friend fight to hold back tears as they stand over his dead body, people that Subaru never once thought would mourn him the way they are. It's really heavy, but it tackled such a tough topic, and it made me feel as if maybe I too undervalued the cost of life for this power. And this is another aspect of live world building that novice writers seem to forget. Actions have consequences, and actions should affect the world and the people around them. While we have seen this mildly in other parts of the previous arcs, the second trial faces this head on. I do hope that this thought process continues in the upcoming arcs, leading us into situations which are vastly influenced by the events that preceded it, like the felling of the Flugel tree or the releasing of the sanctuary. These could have dire, unforeseen consequences as a result of the lore that has been built up in this world. The other part of this arc that really made ReZero stand out to me was the Witches' Tea Party, where all of the witches come together. Greed, Sloth, who is super annoying. I do not like the way they speak. Lust, wrath, gluttony, pride, and envy. Their desires and motivations are shared in one way or another, and up until this point, they are to be seen as evil and feared. However, the depictions are very much contrary to what we have heard so far. The most notable being Wrath, whose ability is to heal people, and Lust, who has no desire for love but wants people to see the love others have for them. Gluttony, on the other hand, is the insatiable hunger, but she created 3 major demon beasts: the White Whale, the Great Rabbit, and the Black Serpent. The Serpent we don't come much into contact with, however, when confronted about the Great Rabbit and the White Whale, her response was that the White Whale is large enough to feed a city of people, and the Great Rabbit can multiply endlessly, effectively generating an endless food source. So why make them so dangerous and need to consume everything? Because that's life. It wouldn't be fair to expect a being to be made to be eaten without expecting it to eat. And honestly, it's a fair point. If you could end world hunger but it comes at the risk of you being eaten, would you end world hunger? If you were made to be eaten, would you not also want a means to survive? Is it not gluttonous to want food to submit itself wholly for our sustenance? While my own answer to these questions are separate from the purpose of this video, I felt that the very existence of these witches bring up very interesting philosophical topics. For Wrath, she can heal all the wounds of someone, but all of the damage will be given to some random person in the world. Would you let them save you? What about a loved one? You might be sacrificing a stranger for your own benefit. Satala, the Witch of Envy, is different, but from what we know from the anime, they jealously ate the other witches. Yet at the tea party, she comes to Subaru and tells them all she ever wanted was for him to love himself, and that she loves him. We do see her in another form in a different episode where she runs rampant, eating everything out of love. I don't really know what to expect as it develops in the upcoming season, but the fact that the Witch of Gluttony made the creatures she did with the reasons she had shows that the author put a lot of thought into the world that they created. And that's kind of the purpose of this jumbled word vomit of a video I made, to explain why I love ReZero and how I was initially wrong about it. I came into making this video with the intent to highlight its world building and to talk shit about Subaru. But as I looked into it more, I found myself feeling ashamed for letting my inner armchair isekai hero take control of my opinion. I wanted to complain about how Subaru doesn't grow, but he does. He grows from giving up in Arc 2 to almost running away in Arc 3 to not once giving up in Arc 4. He definitely grew, and I was wrong. Not only that, but I came to remember why I love this show so much. A well-written, immersive world needs to have world building that has depth. Elements don't have to be explained as long as there's a purpose behind them. The Tree of Flugel is one of them, where it's quite clearly significant, but we don't have any reason for it. Because once you reveal the depth of one thing, then all of the other elements you provide are expected to have that depth, and learning as you go is half the journey. Allowing yourself to contribute details to the world live with the main character will allow unexplored things to have that much more significance on reruns and callbacks. I remember realizing that Roswall probably caused the attack in Arc 2 and being shocked. Allowing your audience to piece together details through information they learn about the world will give them a unique experience as they journey through the unknown universe alongside the main character. ReZero is by no means a masterpiece, but in the realm of Isekai, it is one of, if not the most in-depth and immersive worlds built. While others out there may have lots of really cool places and unique areas, many lack the depth to create meaning behind significant events. ReZero might not have 9 continents each dedicated to a specific race with a different religious system in place, but it does have rooted beliefs and prejudices within its civilians and driven lore that explains the state of the area the story resides in. And while some may see it as confusing, or point to these terrible expository dialogue in Arc 4 flashbacks, the fact is, ReZero has exceptional world building, which makes up the most of the plot. It is not a story about a defined path to success using already established knowledge. It is a story about failure, where success is only possible through character growth and by learning more about the world. And that is why I recommend ReZero to those looking for a dark, mystery thriller action fantasy, but only if you can keep your bowels in check.